Hey,
Hi,
how's it going, Prasanna?
good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's been I don't know, like how many years?
It's been a little while.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Congrats on the exit.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, my last company was definitely like a large run.
That was a big one. That was a big one.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like it's it's been running a company, I feel like it's like not easy and it's a journey and you've been through it. It's definitely a an adventure going through all of that. But
Totally.
yes,
You guys compounded the longest, in a batch. There are the people, like if you sort of took the YC batch, I don't know if any company was sort of alive for as long as you guys were. That's just, you guys just stuck around for a long, long, long time.
yeah, I mean I don't know. Some like there was other companies in there that I think that did a long run, like MemSQL, right? Like those guys. I think they hit a home run as far as I know. And then there was also 5 stars in our batch, right?
I mean,
It-
MemSQL, the founders left way before you guys sold the company. Like none of the founders of MemSQL are still in MemSQL.
right, right.
No founders stuck around for as long as you guys did, as far as
Yeah,
I know.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a journey. It's like how long do you want to do it, right? Like I think everybody has that number in their head on like how do they want to build a company, how long they want to be there. I think
Sure.
we've interviewed like Tracy Young from PlanGrid. You know her, correct? Or maybe you
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, yeah. I've I know of her.
So we've interviewed her. We've interviewed some really famous professors from Stanford and everything. It's been a really fun, I would call it like project that me and Greg have been working on for the last few years, just to like talk about how
Nice.
people built things. And
Yeah.
I honestly think you have one of the coolest journeys and stories, and I don't know if a lot of people know your
Oh,
journey.
thanks, man.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you. I
but
remember we came to rippling to your office and you were like, this is probably the one that's going to make you money. You were right.
there's different types of companies that people build, right? Like there's either consumer apps or there's like business SaaS apps, or there's like transactional apps, or there's like, you're getting money in some, third party way, like selling like clothes or something like that. But there's so many different ways to make money. I just felt like you could have disrupted that industry. But that was really early on when you guys like both got together, like you and your co-founder. But maybe we could backtrack and Greg can introduce himself. Like he's my work on this together. You can introduce yourself,
Sure.
Greg, who you are.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my name is Greg, and I live in California, and I went to Stanford University for a bachelor's, master's, and PhD. I met Daniel actually because I'm running a marketplace, sort of like Craigslist for Stanford students called SU Post. He had a successful like YC company and everything, and I just wanted to see if we could collaborate together, and we became friends, and we go for like dish walks together, and he's one of my best buddies. I had been running a podcast actually before we started this one, and he said like, I've been thinking I want to do something and share my wisdom and explore some of the questions I'm interested in and connect with founders and investors, and let's just do it together. So I think we've done over 17 podcasts now together. And
Nice.
and he mentioned that he was friends with you back in your early days of your startups, before you became so successful. And we'd just be
So he's
honored
still
to
friends with me.
hear your story. I was reading about you with your startup, the Like a Lot, or Like a Little, excuse me,
Like a little. Yeah.
and how it just surged in like sort of growth, and then had kind of a crash. And I was curious about that story, and then also, of course, connecting with Parker Conrad and the great partnership you've had, getting the new venture off the ground. And so I have a ton of questions, but I'd love if you tell me actually first how you met Daniel. I'd love to know that backstory.
Same YC batch. You were in the like a little YC batch, right, Daniel?
Yeah, yeah, same exact batch as you. Yep, it was crazy. So there were 42 companies in our batch, Greg. And I remember Persona had the hottest startup out of all of us. It was like there's just some magic around it, I would call it. Like it was just high growth. They had amazing investors. Like the tech was amazing. They were doing something so different. Like it was like hyper local who liked you in like the same like vicinity. And it was like really hyper local. But like during that time, like the phone was so new. So people were testing the waters of like what the phone could possibly do. And I feel like a Little was like one of the very first companies to take advantage of like actually geolocation before Uber, before all like Lyft, before all of these guys that figured out a lot of it. Like a Little was probably the first one. And there was like a
You know,
handful. Go on, Prasanna.
we weren't even on the phone. Like we were actually a desktop site where you had to choose your location manually. So we weren't even taking advantage of geolocation. And when we sort of eventually tried the phone, that never really worked because phone was so new, it was not as prevalent in campuses. So the phone was super early back in the days. We could never make the phone work back in the days because college students did not have geolocation phones.
They had cheap, I guess they must have had cheaper phones. They couldn't buy iPhones. That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Right.
Wow. I thought you guys were on the phone. I guess you weren't. You were just desktop only.
20 million page views in 6 weeks. And then like 20% of the US college students were on the site within 6 months. Like, how'd you get that type of hyper growth? Was, email marketing or what were you doing to get that kind of spread?
The only way to do that is to go viral. And this thing was going viral. The chief source of our virality was there was just a Facebook like button. Back in those days, Facebook had a widget called a like button. If you clicked on the like button, it used to generate a preview on your feed. So all your friends saw that preview of what that like button did. And we had a clickbaity sort of preview generated. See the gossip in your campus at Stanford or something like that. And it just like immediately went viral. The like button just like kept going viral. We had to find the playbook for how to replicate the success of one campus in another campus. But once we did that, we were able to just repeat it. And the playbook was just like, you had to make a local admin who's actually sort of pretending to make some posts as if things are happening in the college. Someone who knows the local colloquial thing is actually working to make the thing chapter successful in their college. And they get the credit for it. They get a playbook in their hand for how to go about doing it. You pick the most social person, like the club, the sorority head, or someone like that. You give them the admin privileges for that campus and make it like a CV thing, something they can put on their CV. Like that was our playbook. There was a ton of inbound. Everyone wanted to be the campus admin. We just went viral.
And I know you raised like $7 million, A16Z and Barry Milner and Aston Kutcher. How did it go from like that amazing, like the resource gathering to, I think you had described it as a failure. Like what happened?
So slightly zooming back, maybe like the history of, why we started it in the first place. Is like we were, by that point, we've been trying ideas for like 18 months. I immigrated to the US on a tourist visa, trying several startup ideas. Nothing was really working. We were trying to generate ideas, and we met PG several times by then, Paul Graham, like 2 or 3 times. And he was like, dude, you guys are smart, but your ideas suck. Come with a different idea that I like, then I'll fund you. And, we were sort of in this phase where nothing was really working. And actually my girlfriend back then, now my wife, she was studying in Stanford, and a social app was taking off in her college. It was called FitFinder. It was a like little thing, but it was called FitFinder. It was started by a college student in Oxford. Campus directors didn't like it. They asked the student to shut it down for like a couple of months till he graduates. That was our gap. Like that, like literally, there was a social product that had millions and millions of users in the UK that was forced to shut down because the person running it was a student in Oxford. And my girlfriend was like, why don't you guys just start this? You guys, why don't you just copy it? And that's what we did. We dropped everything. My co-founder was like out there working in the field, trying to sell our previous idea. And he came back home. And I was like, the idea has changed now. We're doing something else. He, for an hour, he was unhappy about it. And then he was like, curious, what, million users? Really? In the UK? What the heck? What is going on? So, we were picked by it. And that's how we sort of started this thing. We made it work in Stanford and it went viral. Why didn't it work? So the idea was like, a typical use case was a girl sitting in the cafeteria might make a post. She'll select the cafeteria and she'll make a post saying, hey, the guy in green jeans, I think I have a crush on you. And the whole cafeteria goes like, gaga. Who's posting about whom? Some people are pinging their friends, and maybe this post is about you. And everyone is trying to guess the girl who's posting as well. And there is a natural word of mouth for that stuff, and it goes viral on campus very quickly. Within the first few days, you get almost an insane amount of penetration in campus. 30-40% of Stanford students, 50% of Stanford students were using it within like a day or two. So it went insanely viral. Why did it fail? Expressing their crush once, twice, thrice, like over a few months, and then they got bored about it. They have a bunch of things that they don't want, they want to sort of get off their chest, which they've done. There is just like nothing more to say. History repeats itself. Like this app, this idea keeps working for every new cohort that comes into the campus. So before we started it, there used to be a site called Board at Stanford, Board at Yale, and that used to be like the big thing. And that sort of collapsed, and then like a little that collapsed. And then there is an app called Ekiak that came, and then that collapsed. And then there is an app called Secret that came. Each one was like extremely hot at their time. They raised a lot of money. And then Secret collapsed. And then Nikita Bayer started an app and sold it around the same thing. And then recently he started an app called Gas, was the number one app on the App Store. And then he sold it again. This is like a very weird repeating pattern. This particular app keeps working and not working.
When you saw the retention problems and users dropping out, did you consider pivoting to try to like salvage the business, or how did you react?
Yeah, we tried pivoting. We tried pivoting to like a mobile phone app. We tried pivoting to something that might have a repeat use case, to maybe like campus commerce. We just had like a bunch of college students who maybe would visit the site once a month or something. We had their email on file. Maybe we could activate them. So, for the next year or two, it was a constant sort of ideation and challenge around how do we reactivate these users? What do we get them to do? Can we get them to download the mobile app? Can we get them to transact in colleges? What do we do? We just had like a lot of different ideas that we tried, but like we could just not make anything work.
I mean, I guess one of the smart things you did, just backtracking, you said that you had like an admin on campus that could get it on their resume. That's a really good hack to the system, is getting like an internal advocate. Yelp did something like that with like having hyper local like people there that would like really like get Yelp off the ground. It sounds like you were doing that. Like Uber also, I heard, like does like hyper local cities, and they would get a city off the ground and then they would do that. So like you guys had that, which was that's really smart. That was a really like smart hack that I think could work. You just giving somebody something. Yeah.
Totally. That was instrumental. Without that, you couldn't have sort of taken over all the colleges in the US in record time, in that short period of time. Uber and Yelp pays these people, right? We didn't even, it was not even a close association. It's like, here are a bunch of tools. Here is a document about how to be successful in your campus. Good luck. It's like almost we threw the problem at them. And like they did it. So that poured a lot of gasoline on the fire.
If we could fast forward to your latest venture and all the successes you've seen, I'd love to try to decode that, like what you learned from previous experiences and how you applied it to really make it happen. Could you tell us about?
So I mean, after Like a Little failed, we've been doing it for like 4 years or something. We were once the hardest startup in the Valley. Like, we were sort of voted the most hardest startup in our YC batch. We've never raised money. Like people, we lived in a 1-bedroom house in Palo Alto. Like people just showed up. Like Mike Moret showed up with pizzas, with the Sequoia, he wanted Sequoia to invest. Like Mark Anderson, like Keith Boys, people just started showing up with term sheets. And for the previous 2-3 years, I've tried to, raise money or even try to get a meeting to pitch. And that was insanely hard, right? Like I was not getting even pitch meetings, let alone money, so it was just like going from nobody is willing to talk to me to like, people are actually showing up to talk to me. And, often I had no pitch. Like when Anderson invested 7 million, like I had zero pitch, all I did was, google.com. Like, what do you guys do? I went to likealittle.com, showed the computer. How are you doing? Google.com/analytics, showed the graph. Okay, how much money do you want, like 10 million? How much do you want? Like that's literally it, right? So that was an insane sort of boom bust cycle. And like Facebook CTO Brett Taylor at that time, he showed up and with an acquisition offer for like 100 million. Marissa Mayer showed up. People just like, coming and sort of making these insane offers. 6 months later, when everything sort of crashed and burned, none of these people would talk to us. Like, there was no acquisition conversation whatsoever. Like people don't even respond, right? Like my first sort of insane roller coaster, right? Like real roller coaster, like things are actually hitting. In these video games, there is this sort of save state, like if you sort of pass a certain milestone, if you die, you can come back to that. There is none of that, right? Like you really hit the bottom.
How did you cope with that emotionally? Like I can imagine, I mean, I hear about like founder depression, founder suicides and stuff. Like, how did you cope with that? Or were you just in a really nurturing environment? So it's like, no problem. Let's get to the next thing. Yeah. What did
I mean, we were all burnt out, man. Like we were super burnt out. I was like, fuck this, we tried for another couple of years, right? And nothing was working, My state of mind was, listen, I tried generating ideas for like 2 years, 2.5 years, nothing worked. And then the only thing that works is something that I copied. And then that doesn't work. And I tried pivoting with a large user base for like a couple of years, and that doesn't work. Make anything here? Like, is this even a plausibility? Like I lost like all confidence that I can, make anything work. And I was like, fuck this, I'm never starting a company again. I was done. I left the Valley. I was like, I felt Valley as pretty, like Silicon Valley is pretty toxic for me, for my mental health at that time. We would hang out with the YC batchmates, right? Like, like Daniel and Michael, there are many close friends in the batch. And, we would all hang out and we would be like, how's it going? Everything's going great. There is this new pivot that we're launching. It's going to like change our company or whatever. Nobody wanted to be like, life sucks, man. Nothing is working. You don't want to be that person. I would meet with the MemSQL folks and they would be like, oh, come on. You guys were so hard. What happened? You don't want that. Like, you're putting up a face that you're going to be successful. You have a bunch of employees whose payroll depended on your company being successful. So I was just like really tired of playing this sort of persona that, yeah, things are going to work. And now I do realize actually that is the founder's top job. Actually, that's what you get paid for, to be honest. People want to sort of, this process of innovation is actually really hard. The failure rates are insanely high. If everyone kept thinking about it, we would never do anything of consequence. You need like a wrapper layer who's able to take all the pain, who's able to take all these sort of stress and like suffer all these mental issues, so that the layer underneath you is completely sort of isolated from the pessimism, and you can create a bubble of optimism where people can just come, show up and do their best work without thinking whether the market will want it, whether it will work, all those questions. If someone can take it away, lots of people would love an environment where they can do their best work. So, ironically, now I realize that's actually the founder's top job. It is tiring, it is mentally exhausting. And by the way, about founder depression and suicide, my co-founder Parker, so he had a boom bust story similar to mine. It was Zenefits, the hottest startup. He was nobody. He was a repeat failure before he founded Zenefits. He's been trying startups for 10 years. Nothing was really working. And then he found Zenefits. He was the hottest startup in the Valley. He was the fastest growing company by a large margin. They made like 50 million ARR in 20 months, which is probably like one of the top records, if not within the top 5 records, even till date. And he went from that to like crashing and getting fired from Zenefits. And he went from being the most important person to the person that now people are not taking their phone calls. Like he was going through what I was going through. After like a little, I was like, fuck it, I'm never starting a company again. I'm going to Europe and I'm going to chill. I'm going to get married, which is what I did. I was chilling in Europe. And after Zenefits, he was like, I wrote him a mail. I was a part of Zenefits. I was an early. So after like a little, I didn't want to do consumer internet again because, I didn't want to be in a place where I built something and then it becomes a fad. Nobody wanted to use it. So the opposite of consumer internet was the enterprise, it's like stable and predictable. If someone is paying you money, it's they're sort of like going to want the product. They're going to want the product for a long time. Zenefits was very interesting, when I was trying to come out of my break from Europe and stuff. And I really wanted to go back to the hyper growth, although it seems stressful at that time. Like that still seems like the best thing I could do with my life. It pulls the best work out of me. Very, very satisfying. So I joined Zenefits, and Zenefits went through boom bust story. It was the hottest startup at that time. Stock 10x in the 1 year that I was with Zenefits. It went from like 500 mil to like a 4 bill valuation or something. It was an insane ride. It also collapsed, right? I have great luck. Wherever I go, you can see big collapses. Parker was out, and I mailed him saying, hey, I know you're going to start another company. I would love to do it with you. Dude, I'm fucking done starting companies. I'm going to Europe. I'll never start a company ever again. And he actually left Europe. And there was a ton of negative articles about him, everything blaming him for the failure of Zenefits and so on and so forth. And he was under an NDA, so he couldn't talk about it, right? The options he was considering were either suicide. He was super depressed. He was either considering suicide or start rippling. Like that, those were like his actual options. And he's been through a lot. Like, he was a cancer survivor. He was like having cancer. He was going through chemo at the time and so on and so forth. So, he was going through a lot of pain.
Thank you for sharing the ups and downs, because sometimes you get this impression you just see the highlight reels, right? But I'm grateful for you, being real with us about what you've experienced.
I mean, I think one thing that was probably bad, it was in YCombinator, everybody prepped his company up, your company Prasanna, to be like this like golden, perfect company. We didn't get that. We're just to the side. We were like, oh, there's everyone else. So then there was like a little, and I was like, whoa, look at them. They've got this like crazy growth. So it put pressure on you that I think a lot of the companies like we didn't have. We didn't have that. Everybody's like, oh, they're okay. Who are those guys? And you had this like insane like pressure because everybody was like asking you, at least when in our batch at the time, like in that time period where it was just hyper pressure, where like everybody was talking about your company. It creates pressure in somebody like, oh, how do I live up to those expectations?
That's one. It's also like the slope was also rapidly changing, right? On one day, like, it's like really working in a phenomenal way, and you have some set of problems. One day it's really not working. You've hired for the previous slope. You've sort of built the previous company. Now the company is completely flipped. Versus, and we've done tons of pivots and stuff, right? Like I always say, when new founders come in, like the biggest lesson that I learned, it's actually better to be like an interview street or like a Dr. Chrono, because you guys were, just compounders. Every year you would sort of 2x or 3x your revenue. You just sort of, it was a smooth slope. There was not like, a lot of points where there was existential risk. You guys just like decided on your market. You were sort of very clear about it. And you were just like every day coming into work and like, what is your opportunity today? And there is not, a ton of hyper growth-ish opportunities, but there is always a 2x, 3x. Internet was a growth market. It just kept growing you. And all you had to find was like, which customer can you sort of solve the problem for 10 years? And if you choose that, then it's, sometimes it's kind of like hard to fail.
Right. I think businesses are in some aspects are easier than consumer. Like consumer blows my mind. It's such a different, it's like you either are successful or you're not. There's no in between. There's no in between. It's like you're either Facebook or you're not. Like there's a lot of like zombie social companies out there, right? There's a lot of them.
Right.
I'm not going to name names, but you see these companies and you're like, I'm not going to log into it because why would I log into that? I think the pressure is on, at least in that space, is really, it's just bad pressure. Like it's, binary. In business, I think that there's some companies that can grow, and grow and grow and grow. But you were pretty cutthroat in your career about like switching. Like 4 years is not that long. In the grand scheme of things, 4 years of your life, you shut the company down, or maybe you didn't, but you just said like, time to change. A lot of founders just are not able to do that. Like, why would you do that, Prasanna? Like, why would you not quit, just like move on? Like, what is it that to do that?
Yeah. I mean, see, first of all, if you look at our YC batch, more than half the founders are out by year 2. We don't see them they're sort of moved on. They've probably taken up jobs or something. Years is like, at least more than the 75th or the 80th percentile, even within our YC batch, I think. And then the second thing is, my co-founders didn't actually give up. The other 2 went on 10 years, pivot after pivot after pivot. And each year I would meet my co-founder and tell them, hey, you're sort of wasting your life. Why are you doing this? It's not working. Why are you doing this? They always wanted to try the next thing. In particular, one of my co-founders was, we met at Stanford. He's from Stanford GSB. And he was super, I shouldn't stereotype, but like, I mean, there's something about like the MBAs being attracted to the hot new thing. Like, like right now, I bet he would be building like a GPT company. There is this thing about like consensus think on MBAs. Like I just have a, bias that, if you sort of keep jumping from the one hot thing to the next hot thing, it just tends to not work. Those two sort of kept going for like 10 years till the money ran out before giving up. And I would meet my other co-founders, like the technical person, and I would sort of meet him every year when I was doing Zenefits. I would meet him and say, "Hey, listen, you're the smartest guy that I know. Like, why don't you come to Zenefits? Like, I think this is a good bet." And then that crashed. And he's like, "Oh, that look what happened to Zenefits." And then when I was founding Rippling, I was like, "Hey, listen, why don't you join me? I'm doing this thing called Rippling. I think it has a high success rate." And every year, as I was doing Rippling, I kept pinging him. I would tell him, "Why don't you join me? Like, dude, like this is really working. This is taking off." And every year he was like, "No, no, no. There is this one idea I want to try. There is this thing that I want to try." And then the last few years, it has been he went to Facebook. He joined Facebook after this whole traumatic 10-year experience. And he's just like so risk averse now. He's so smart about startups. He's able to clearly evaluate what matters in a company. He would make a really good sort of startup employee or investor or whatever, but he just does not have any risk appetite left in him. He's beaten out, all his risk is beaten out. He's now working at Facebook. He's happy there. He's bought a house on a mortgage. He's so committed to Facebook now that he's even bought a house on a mortgage. Other extreme that I've seen, in fact I haven't seen a lot of that. There is some downside in sticking around and like doing like random things for a long time.
I'm curious about those early conversations you were having with Parker before you started Rippling. That you talked about it really being a bifurcation point for him, where almost going to give up on life or try to use this creative potential and do something great, despite almost being vilified really by the media. And I'm curious, like, how you brainstormed, like, what ideas did you map out? Like, did you have, like, from your past experience, sort of a priority list of, like, what kind of action items you wanted to hit, or even a do not do list, like do not raise money from Sequoia or something like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, we had plenty of those, right? The idea map was the easy part because you are coming out of like a place, Zenefits, which already worked at scale. We had an insane amount of customers, paying customers. We knew their pain point, and that was crashing. So the market leader was crashing and collapsing. And for some structural reasons, the incumbents were not making the Zenefits play. Like the competitors in that space at the time, Gusto, ADP, or whatever, they were not playing for all in one. So all these competition at the time were vertical competition. They were a payroll system only, right? And Zenefits came in and said, like, we are 3-in-1. Now they had to catch up to that state of the market. So they were already sort of overstretched on their engineering, and they were not sort of willing to play for like all in one, right? So literally now you have an important company collapsing. Let's say Google is collapsing and no one else is rushing to take its place. Generating good ideas was not the problem. Now we did have the big risk. We all knew, okay, 3-in-1 is what worked for Zenefits. That is where the incumbents are all going in. We're going to do 4-in-1, 5-in-1, 6-in-1. At which number, what n-in-1 is this actually going to work? At what point is this going to take off? Like that was the risk. And it just needs like a lot of capital or whatever to go till that point. For all these reasons, there was just no competition. There is no one else who was able to play. The big guys aren't able to play because, they're overstretched. Their DNA is changing suddenly from a vertical product to like many in one product. And then the startups couldn't play because it just needed a lot of money. Like we burned $10 million before we had a single dollar of revenue. Before we had a single user, single dollar of revenue, whatever. There is no startup competition. There is no big company competition. So the space was all ripe for taking. So the ideas were just plenty, right? Like we knew exactly what to build, in which sequence to build it. We had decent thesis on what matters. And it really helps that Parker was the user that we were building for companies for like 10 years, 15 years by that point. He's the admin. He's always been the HR person at Zenefits, at his previous startups. So he was just building for himself. So, we had like pretty strong view on what the product should be. We've never spoken to any customer. I strongly believe in like startups shouldn't talk to their users, or the ones that are, mega successful are like where the founder is the chief user. There is no other, you sort of invalidate the need to talk to a user at all in the first. So we did have a decent sense of roadmap of what to build. We had like a 5-year, 10-year roadmap, and, to this date, we are still executing against the roadmap with not a lot of surprises. So it was a straight line shot at goal, perfectly worked. I was actually surprised how perfectly it worked. In fact, that sort of makes me question this whole YC lean startup philosophy that I've grown up with. I've sort of thrown that away to the trash. I do think you can actually see 6 moves, 12 moves deep in chess, and the board plays out like that. I don't believe that. I don't believe this sort of play a move, see what happens kind of games.
What kind of like signals in the universe did you sort of perceive when you came to that awareness that this unified platform would be the way to go? Because normally you think of startups as being really vertically specialized and niche and everything. But I mean, do you have a meditation practice where you're kind of picking up this information, or what do you do?
First of all, that is Parker, right? That's all Parker. Like, he's the user. He was building for himself. He thought he needed it. He just had strong conviction why he needed it, because he was actually feeling the pain of not having it. If you didn't have it, then each time you hire an employee, there are like 20 different systems where Parker needs to manually go and enter in the data, and he might miss. And like, if he misses, the employee showed up in Parker's door, they was waiting for Parker to give him access to Slack so the employee could start his job and so on. Parker had insane conviction that needed to exist just from personal experience. And then by the time we were doing rippling, that was no longer the question, right? He had already started Zenefits. That has already been proven out that people need it. So now we were just brainstorming, what else do people need other than those three things? What more do we need to build before we sort of gave it to people? So it was never really sort of a question of whether people need it, which is usually the question for most startups, which is usually the biggest risk for most startups, which are the things that I call fat startups. That tends to not be the question. You kind of really know, if you build it, they will come. The question of like, so then your question sort of dates back into Zenefits. What you're really asking is like, when you founded Zenefits, when you didn't have the customer signals, how did you know? How did Parker know? It would be useful. And there is also a meta question of like, why didn't others know that it was useful? Like, why Parker? And there is also the third meta question around, why did people know then? Like, why now? Like, why at that point in time? Why did it work at that point in time? And the weird thing about startups is like, those three questions produce like 1 + 1 + 1 = 1,000 sort of outcomes. Like when those three stars align, it produces the extreme outliers. All those things independently are like rare to create, but when they sort of intersect, they produce like mega outliers, like Zenefits, which sold for million ARR in like 20 months. Like, how do you do that? Like, people have never done that. Like, how do you do that? You can only do that if there is like ton of latent demand already existing in the market, that you just touched a nerve and you're able to sell to the tiny cream of the cream of the cream, like the earliest adopters who are willing to try a buggy product, a broken product. Zenefits was a really bad product, actually. They sold ahead of engineering. So, I mean, I think in Zenefits' case, there were a unique set of circumstances that created it. In terms of why Parker. So first of all, in terms of why now, like the timing question in the market, that was the most straightforward. It's basically like they were giving out, the product of Zenefits was give out a payroll and a HR system for free and make money by being a health insurance broker. People have been trying to displace the health insurance brokers for a long time. That has never worked. It is protected by law. It's kind of regulated by law. So you can't say, I'll replace your health insurance broker and I'll give you back money. That's not going to work. Government will sort of sue you and shut you down. You can't share your commissions with the company. So there is a lobby group which protects them. And you couldn't sort of replace the health insurance brokers for a long time. And then what happened in 2013, which is incidentally when Zenefits was founded, was Obama came to power and he passed a law which said health insurance rates are going to be standard across everyone in the US. It doesn't matter which broker you use. So brokers no longer can claim that they have special access to pricing and stuff like that. And that is when Zenefits got founded. That is a point in time in which an array of online health insurance brokers companies got founded. There was a company in the same YC patch called Zen Benefits or something. I don't know the exact name. But there were two health insurance brokerage companies in the same YC batch almost, right? Now, that was the timing. That was the why now. Then the additional twist on Zenefits was actually, if you go to companies and say, I'll give you, I'll give you a kickback in sort of health insurance, that didn't sell as much as, if you went, I mean, first of all, that was still illegal. So you couldn't do that. So you could use any health insurance broker. Why online? You were like, no, I'm not going to use the online broker. I'm going to go to with the offline broker, right? Because offline broker did unscalable stuff. He showed up to your office. He sort of wined and dined the executives. He took you out for golf and so on and so forth. That was not really working. So all the startups which were doing online health insurance at that time did not eventually work. What did work was these small companies did not have payroll systems, did not have HR systems. So Parker was like, yeah, I can't legally pay you back money, but I can give you some software for free. Nobody stops me from doing that. He gave that software for free and then became the health insurance broker. So that's how Zenefits got started. That's the why now question, which is sort of fairly unique. You couldn't have done Zenefits like 5 years before, for example. And then why Parker question. It's like there was this insane product market fit because like the founder market fit because Parker had been doing startups for like 10 years and he's been doing this his startup was successful enough. Like, his previous company was called Sigfig. It had 10 employees. It had raised a bit of VC, like a few $1 million or something. It was successful enough that there were multiple employees and there was actually HR work to be done. There was a need for health insurance, but it was unsuccessful enough that you couldn't hire like a HR person or an admin or something. There are only 10 employees. So it sort of fell on Parker to do this stuff. And Parker was fired. So he was freed up. The companies which are unsuccessful enough and run like that, they can run for a while, right? They could become family businesses. So Parker was one of the few which got fired and got freed up from that experience. The experience is fresh off his head. If you're a very successful founder, one, you don't need to do a startup again. You're rich. Why choose pain? If your office admin has been doing the work, you don't even realize it's a problem and you don't sort of start this company. Parker was in this Goldilocks condition, successful enough, still unsuccessful, hungry enough, but still experienced. He knew how to build companies. He also was the best health insurance broker because his company had health insurance. Most startups which are not successful doesn't even have health insurance and founders know nothing about health insurance, right? But because it was slightly successful, the company had health insurance and he had cancer. So he really had to know everything and anything about choosing the right health insurance provider so that his treatments are covered and so on and so forth. He didn't have a ton of money. He sort of was a product of a unique set of circumstances. Not a lot of people who are qualified to start Zenefits, So there is also this sort of rare event, intersects another rare event sort of situation that produces these outcomes.
Why choose him as a co-founder? Like thousands of people in the world, he moved on from Zenefits. Like, why give up that stable job at Zenefits? Right? It was stable, right? I guess. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't, but like, why go and pick him as your co-founder? Because I don't know, got someone else in Silicon Valley or whatever, but like you went and left Zenefits. Like, I guess you saw something in him, like maybe there was a good chemistry, like maybe he respected you respected him. Like, what was it?
Yeah, I mean, so we definitely respected each other, worked together with each other. There is that, but that's just table stakes, right? More importantly, from my background, first of all, I knew that Zenefits was done the moment he was fired because that a tech, I mean, having been in startups for 10 plus years, we both know that most of the value of a tech company is in the potential and the future. There's nothing, I mean, most of the valuation is just ascribed to what will happen 10 years down the line when cash flows get produced, right? So it's like you're sort of projecting for like high momentum, high growth towards that endpoint to sort of meet even a large part of today's valuation, even, right? So as soon as that momentum breaks, as soon as you realize when the founder is gone, you need to correct for a long time. You don't have this sort of ambition to sort of build out this suite of products which can go out and create these hundreds of billions in market cap. So you knew, like the moment that Parker was fired, I knew Zenefits was done in a way that I was almost surprised that others did not know. I was just like out of the matrix looking at the zoom out, and it's kind of obvious to me. And I bet it would be obvious to you, if you're sitting there, like, founder got fired. Yeah, the ambitions are going to get scaled down. Like, you're never going to be that $100 billion company, which is what the 4 billion valuation sort of comes out of, right? The odds that you'll be the multi-$100 billion company. It sort of produces the 4 billion valuation. So immediately you kind of know that your stock is not worth the piece of paper it's written on. It's not even worth the strike that you have. So you know that you have to quit. Like, what are you going to do? Like, stick it around? What? Why would you waste your life? So that was not even in the consideration set to continue at Zenefits. Like, I never went to work for one day after that. Like, I'm done, I'm out. And I found it fairly surprising that otherwise reasonably smart people did not see the world the way it was, just naked. In terms of like why choose Parker, honestly, it's mostly the other way around, right? Like, I mean, if you look at my background in founding so many startups, the thing that is like, I realize the value of a really good idea map. I mean, you're going on a treasure hunt. There is a gold somewhere, and you don't know exactly where the gold is, but you have some instincts. You know how to sail if you have a decent map, right? That's what you sort of learn from 10 years of startups. And you kind of value that map quite a bit. And you sort of understand situations. The likelihood of the treasure is insanely high. Like, of course, there is treasure underneath the Zenefits burial spot. Of course, it's kind of obvious. There was gold when people dug it. Like, what do you expect, right? So that spot was insanely rich with likelihood of treasure. That was obvious to me. Who better has that map than Parker himself, right? Like the guy who originally led the expedition, the captain of the pirate ship. You could have, who better to go sailing with to find that particular treasure than Parker? It was honestly the other way around. Like, he had the map, he was the expert, it was his idea. He's the right person to sort of sail that ship to the treasure. I just was like a decent pirate. I was a pretty good pirate. I've been on other sailing expeditions, just not on this one. I have like decent pirate instincts.
How did you build that relationship with Parker? Did you, get dinners with them, or like brainstorm on the whiteboard at the office, or go to movies, or like what? How did you establish that connection?
No, absolutely not. That's definitely not the way to build the relationship. So we worked together at Zenefits, right? And it was a war zone more than anything. And I was director of engineering. I was reporting to his co-founder, who's a CTO. It was a small company when I joined. Like, it was only like 10, 20 engineers when I joined. The whole company was pretty small when I joined. And I was like one of the top paid people there. Like, I had a lot of equity. So you just have that relationship. It's early on, you're going to war, and it's a hyper growth company, kept taking on more and more responsibility. And the biggest one that I took on was ADP. Was so Zenefits was a 3-in-1 platform. They said, hey, listen, why don't I give you like free HR system, and I connect up with a payroll system called ADP. They were selling this sort of package, and one day ADP woke up and said, wait a minute, I want to be the next Zenefits. And they built a competitive product, and they cut off the API overnight. Parker was like, fuck, this is existential to the company. Of course, what are companies going to do if they can't run payroll, right? This is existential, and I need a solution in a month. In a month, we need a payroll system. And Parker was like, he gave me the task of like going and trying to acquire a payroll system. So I flew around the US, met with different payroll systems, and tried to see whether we can buy them. We made an offer to Gusto. We sort of met with several payroll companies trying to buy them. And over that time, I sort of really understood how to build a payroll system. I had no idea like how to build one. Over that time, like speaking with many of these founders, I really understood, okay, this is the way to build a payroll system. And we made an offer to a company. We really thought we could acquire it. And then it fell through like last minute because founder just wanted more. I said, I'll just build it. Now I understand it enough that I can build it. Let me just build it. And there are folks in the company like David Sachs are like, dude, engineers always say, let me just build it. It's really easy, but they don't really build it. You should just buy a company. And Parker was like, he came to me, he sort of pissed, are you really sure? Like, how will you build it? What would be the timeline? What are the components? And I sort of painted him a picture fairly clearly. Look, this can be done. I'll build it, but I can't do it in a month. I need like 2 months, like, because already a month had gone by. So I need a month more. It's like, okay, fine, let's do it. We went around writing code, trying to build the payroll system. We did not get done in a month, but in 2 months, we did have a payroll system that was internally used by Zenefits alone. And we launched it over the next few months. So that was like an experience that we both sort of sailed together. It was an existential experience. Incidentally, I was also therefore the best person for the job at Rippling, because I was the only one who could build a payroll system, which is an integral part of Rippling. To build a payroll system, it takes like 10 years. Like, these companies build for a long time, but I was able to build in a few months the first time. The second time I could build in a few weeks. So I would also make the best co-founder for Rippling.
I see what you mean about kind of feeling like you're going to war together. And it seems like Parker really looked to you as like, this guy delivers. Like, I can see how that would really build up his trust.
And I also, delivered on the most important problem that Zenefits had. Like, before this payroll thing, the biggest problem that Zenefits had was the quality of the engineering team was so poor. The product was so behind what they were already selling. And that's what I was working on like full time, before this payroll thing. And, I sort of hired more people personally, then there were a number of people in the company. Like, I was the biggest recruiter than their recruiter. Like, he had evidence that I could build a payroll system. He had evidence that I could build a good team. So I was a decent pick for a co-founder CTO.
How do you think about success now that you've achieved this? Like, how do you think about like kind of giving back? Like, I know you're from India and a lot of poverty there and struggling and everything. Do how do you think about that now that you've hit this like milestone?
Yeah. I mean, I do think, I have way more wealth than I know what to do with, in my lifetime. I can't possibly spend it. The defaults seem to be, okay, just give it away in some way or form, try to make an impact with it, which I'm attracted to. I'm also attracted to like another way of thinking about this, which is I'm lucky to have people like, people around me, the YC batch. This is not the first time someone has encountered a problem. Now you have people I can call on the phone who sort of created billions and billions in wealth. They've sort of gone through these journeys and, how they think about it. Sam Altman is like an inspiring example, right? Like, he was around when our batch, remember Daniel, like, and he was sort of hanging around. He was trying to sort of figure it out. He had just made a bunch of money. I'm sort of more attracted to this idea. At least Sama's story, as I sort of see it, is like he made a bunch of money. He was one of the best investors in the world, still probably is. He sort of converted like $1 million to $200 million. He was still sort of killing it on the investing side. Like he was the first check at Rippling. He's making several hundred million off of Rippling as well, right? So he's just he's just one of the best investors in the world. Like whatever he does prints money. Many might know already, like he's gay and he's not going to have kids and stuff. And there was a point in time he's waking up and he's like, yeah, I can make infinite more money. What's it going to do? Like absolutely nothing, right? And there was a point where he was just like giving away all of his money, except for he's bought his houses, he's bought his like helicopters and stuff. And then he sort of realizes, okay, this is super inefficient. Like, the person that I'm giving to, they're not innovating for the world. They're just solving the local problem. There's not a lot of high IQ that goes into this. It's hard to create permanent change. And then he sort of zooms out, meets Musk. And then there is a narrative that, okay, actually, the best way to give is maybe to sort of try huge moonshots, and like Larry Page has sort of spoken about it. He would rather give his money to Musk than to like a charity. So there is also like that alternate line of thinking, which is, perhaps the bottleneck to like transforming lives is just like, there is just like not a lot of big, bold ideas that are being tried. Capital is one way to just accelerate that. This idea of like transhumanism, like we can just solve all humanity's problems. In the areas of the markets where economy is working well, most benefits are reaching everyone. Everyone can have a car today. Like even the homeless person in the US can have a car. Like cars have gotten super commoditized. We make more food, and we've been making more food than all humans need, than what humans need for a while, right? Now the problem is like more military and social organization, societal organization. Why some portion of Earth does not get food? It's actually a social organization problem. And there are sort of crypto solutions which can sort of change that social organization. You don't need to sort of depend on the local army to sort of so there are all kinds of like technological ways to like rethink these problems, which can sort of get fixed at the root cause level rather than the symptoms being treated with some medicine by just like giving handouts for like small period of time. So that's an intriguing idea as well, which certainly I'm still at a phase of life where I have a lot of energy to sort of throw at these problems. That I actually sort of tend to believe in that version of the world, transhumanism narrative, which is like, we can just upgrade ourselves out of these problems, versus the, hey, listen, someone has a problem, let's go sort of fix that unscalably, so I can feel good, so I can feel better about myself. There's certainly like a interesting divide that emerges, but I'm more on the techno utopian side of things.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I guess we only scheduled an hour, Prasanna. So I guess to wrap things up, where do you see the world in 10 years? And I guess like, what advice would you give your kids? You have one or two?
I mean, one thing is like, we live in everyone understands, like we live in a period of history that is actually not that common. It's actually a rare period of history where we're going through sort of technological exponential acceleration, right? It used to happen in the early 1900s where humanity suddenly sort of figured out aeroplanes, cars, electricity, steam engine, telegraph, phone. all those things happened within a tiny period of time, 20 years, and we had the roaring 20s, and we had the big crash of the 1930s. There are only select periods of time where humanity goes through those sort of exponentially accelerating innovation timeframes. And we're going through one right now. And we are all beneficiaries, you, me, Daniel, of this sort of period. Earth is just insanely plastic. Like you can just mold it very, very easily. Like the rules of the game are like changing. There is not like a bunch of incumbents. There's not like regulations that are clamping down some stuff. You suddenly have an opening called the computers and the internet, which is transforming humanity. Like if you sort of do 1,000-year zoom out, we're all beneficial. I mean, we created significant amount of wealth, like way more than we could ever spend in our lifetime, precisely because if you take a sort of a million-year sort of zoom out of human beings existed on Earth, what are the big events of life on Earth? One of the the previous big event is like humans came. We had this sort of brain, and humans came and like they took over agency and they took over Earth. And then the next biggest event I would argue is the internet, where all these brains are connected through digital wires at the speed of light. And the ideas are just like, for the first time, humanity created language and ideas could spread, right? Now ideas are spreading at the speed of light. Ideas are forming in this new thing called the internet. And, like biological thoughts or the memes got a digital upgrade. And that is unlocking so much wealth and so much innovation, and so much sort of rapid exponential spread of ideas that everything is breaking. Nuclear fusion is breaking. Everything is breaking because just suddenly humanity sort of is able to iterate on ideas on turbocharge. And we created a lot of wealth as a result of being early to the trend, being at the right place at the right time. We both cornered some valuable real estate in this new sort of Martian surface, which is turning out to be super valuable, right? So first of all, we are in a historical period where a new frontier has just opened up, and there is a massive transfer of wealth from the old money to the new money. The Rockefellers are getting printed like right now, and it's sort of historic. And the next 10 years, 20 years, we are probably going to have like a crypto accounting system. We're probably going to have a new world that's running on crypto. We're probably going to have like AGIs that you're sort of interfacing, like they're like entities. They have their own wallet, crypto wallet. They sort of control their own money, and like they're actually like real entities, right? We already have that in crypto, like Davos, like Ethereum. Who runs Ethereum? Nobody. There's some internet thing somewhere, foundation that controls this thing, but nobody actually runs it, right? So these are real entities. Like AJ is going to be one of those entities, and and nuclear fusion is happening. It's just an insane accelerationist period. Like we get to watch this movie from the front row seat, and that's just amazing. I just enjoy that. Like I'm super grateful to be in a time like that where you can actually watch.
Along those lines, I wanted to get in there before you go. I know you have that connection with Sam Altman through your YC experience, and I'm curious if you could share anything you'd be comfortable with as far as what you know about his vision for like Chat GPT and AI. Like where do you think this could go?
I mean, he's one of those people that, there are a couple of people in my life, like whenever I meet them and whenever I sort of talk with them, I come out this meeting saying like, dude, this is a joke. Like, you must be kidding me. I don't believe you, and Sama is one of them. Meta Cohen, which is another crypto billionaire, is like another one of them. And, I met with Sama, like, when he was sort of leaving YCs as a CEO, like CEO of YC, which is arguably the most important sort of the next Stanford of the world or whatever, right? But arguably a lot more powerful than Stanford, right? And he went out to do this AGI thing, OpenAI thing. And, he sort of told me very clearly, AGI is happening. And, he wants to go do that. And that's the most important thing he could do in the world. That was ridiculous. I was thinking, this is just like another charity, right? We were talking about how to do charity with your money. Okay, Sama, okay, this is how you choose to burn your money. I respect that, great. But I don't think it's going to work. Like that was my mental state of things. And, he really believed in it. And, a lot of very smart people believed in it. He raised $1 billion in commitments from Paul Graham and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk, like when he went and did that. So he's always sort of done this sort of crazy stuff. He believed before anyone even understood. I think that's the key thing to aspire for in my book. That's where sort of respect comes from. You believe before people understand. I mean, I do think, he's really going for AGI. He's dedicating his life to that. He sort of went out and believed that there are two things in his life that matter to him, that it is AGI And the bottleneck to the AGI is the energy production of the world. And therefore, the way to solve it is to do nuclear fusion. Those are the two things he's gonna work on. And he put most of his net worth in those two things. And he sort of met Elon, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna pull a Elon, and he actually did pull an Elon. That's super inspiring. That you could actually go out and do that.
That's a really great way. That's a really great way to end honestly the podcast, Prasanna. I feel like this is a really great, eye-opening, inspiring talk. Honestly, I'm inspired talking to you. You've done some amazing things over the last honestly, like God knows how long you've been working at startups. But this was awesome. Yeah, I guess we could end the podcast. I'm gonna press stop on record.
Yeah.